Folklore, urban legends, and ghost stories have been passed down throughout Japan's history. Despite the impressive number of ghost stories that Japan harbors, none are as impactful and famous in its home country as Yotsuya Kaidan. And despite its fame and infamy within its home country, I have seen very little said about it outside of Japan. With that said, allow me to introduce you to a story filled with horror as well as betrayal. A story based on horrific real-life events and tied to equally real cursed locations. Yotsuya Kaidan, or the Ghost Story of Yotsuya, was officially written in the year 1825 by a man named Tsuruya Namboku IV. Its name comes from the story's setting, then a rural part of Edo, Japan, now a modern-day part of Shinjuku, Tokyo. That name being Yotsuya. Yotsuya is a part of Tokyo now. See what I'm saying? So this ghost story was initially written as a kabuki stage play, though in the many years since then, it's been adapted into various other media forms. At least 30 times as of right now in 2023. These other forms ranging from film, animation, to even manga. So, before we go ahead and look at the real-life horrors associated with this ghost story, let's go ahead and look at the ghost story itself. One regarded by many as Japan's most famous ghost story of all time. So here it is. Allow me to read you the ghost story of Yotsuya. But real quick, I want to thank this video's sponsor, MD Hair. I've done a lot with my hair. It's pretty much been every color out there at some point. That, along with all the stress life throws my way, isn't exactly good for the overall health of my scalp and hair. Actually, it's very bad. So bad, in fact, that I've experienced thinning and hair loss, and I'm only in my 20 hairs quiz and scalp analysis. These steps pinpoint your personal needs, and with favorite thing has to be the Hair MD Regrowth Serum. A lot of serums out there will weigh your hair down, especially with fine hair like mine, but this one definitely does not. You just apply it, wait for your hair to dry, and brush it out. It leaves my hair so light, soft, and full of volume. Customize your hair growth treatment with MD Hair. Use my promo code SAKURA70 to get your first month of customized products at 70% off. The story opens with a Ronin named Tamiya Iemon in a heated argument with Yotsuya Samon, the topic of argument being Oiwa, the wife of Iemon and the daughter of Samon. Both men are Ronin. They are samurai that lack a master and thus live in severe poverty. This occurrence was commonly seen during this post-war period of Japan that Yotsuya Kaidan was written within. Because Iemon, the husband, failed to support Oiwa, Samon was demanding he separate from her, feeling Oiwa, and by extension he, her father, deserved better. Oiwa herself had expressed her dismay to her father. Now, Iemon himself is not a good person. Instead of making an honest living, he scams and steals from others. He is not after anyone's best interest, including Oiwa's. With that said, Iemon's actions in response to his father-in-law's request is typical of his character. For, you see, this unfortunately meant sneaking out to the red light district and doing the only thing she could do to get money to support herself and simply live. Well, the only thing a woman of that era could do to support herself without a husband. Or at least a husband willing to support both of them. Oiwa hoped to be able to escape the awful treatment she received from her husband by supporting herself in the only way she was able. After the incident with her father, Iemon returns home to an unknowing Oiwa. He lies and tells her father was randomly attacked by a bandit and did not survive. Upon hearing this, Oiwa fell into a deep despair, vowing to seek vengeance and come after the person who caused her father's demise. Iemon, being the manipulative person he was, told Oiwa he would seek this vengeance himself if she promised to stay by his side and never leave, remaining his wife. Oiwa, in a state of sheer devastation, reluctantly agrees. Some time passes and Oiwa becomes pregnant. She gives birth to a healthy baby boy, but she herself becomes ill following the delivery, childbirth proving far too much for her. And because Ieamon was already a horrible husband, he proves to be an additionally horrid father. Instead of being grateful that his wife was still alive and with him and that she brought his son into the world, Ieamon became even more abusive. He came to resent the both of them and see them as a burden. He did not want a child or a sickly wife who could not care for this child. And it was at this very time when Oiwa was ill and needed love and support more than ever when another woman came into the picture. This woman was named Olme, and she was the granddaughter of a very wealthy doctor. She had an unnatural obsession with Ieamon and was wildly jealous of his wife. The grandfather, wanting to help his beloved granddaughter to get what she desired, paid a visit to the home of Ieamon and Oiwa. The doctor acts as though he's providing the struggling family with a service out of the kindness of his heart, and provides Oiwa with an ointment. He tells Oiwa to rub this ointment on her face every day, and she will be cured. She will be healthy once again. Only, this was not a treatment for her illness. The ointment contained chemicals that severely burned and disfigured Oiwa's face. With each passing day of use, Oiwa's face became extremely disfigured from all these severe burns. So much so that those who saw her face would flinch from how gruesome the sight was, though nobody had the guts to tell Oiwa how bad her face really looked. With that, Olme felt more confident in being the more beautiful woman. Her grandfather then made Ieamon an offer to marry Olme and be offered a well-paying job as a samurai. No longer would Ieamon be a ronin without a master or employer. And Ieamon, who was now disgusted by the sight of his wife and her burnt face, accepted this offer without any thought whatsoever. In fact, he was delighted to receive such an offer. And during all of this, Oiwa was still unaware of how horrible her face had looked. She thought the burning sensation of the ointment simply meant that it was working, as that is what she was told. And despite everything she had already been through, Oiwa was about to be met with further hardship. You see, Ieamon didn't just want to leave his wife. He wanted to make sure he still looked like a good guy after doing so. Like he was the one being wronged in the whole situation. And for that reason, Ieamon paid a friend of his to enter the family's home and force himself onto Oiwa. Ieamon planned to just walk in and act as though he caught her having an affair. But things didn't go as planned. The friend arrives and sees the sight of Oiwa, her face brutally disfigured at this point, and still as sick and bedridden as she was following childbirth. And on top of it all, she was all alone. Suddenly feeling great remorse, the friend instead tells Oiwa what her husband had planned for her. He also revealed that Ieamon himself was the one who murdered her father. Finally, he holds a mirror to Oiwa's face and reveals the state she is in. After hearing everything and finally knowing the truth about the kind of person her husband was and what really happened to her father, Oiwa enters a fit of rage. In this rage, Oiwa gets up and begins combing her hair to prepare to confront those who wronged her. Hairbrushing was seen as a very appealing and seductive action during this time in Japan, especially if the hair was long and healthy, which Oiwa's hair still was. And, for that reason, the friend of Ieamon simply watched on with interest. However, that interest eventually turned into sheer horror. The burns had unknowingly spread to Oiwa's scalp, and unfortunately, her hair began to come out in large chunks due to the damaged scalp. This left half of Oiwa's head completely burned and bald, as blind rage tried to rush out the door, only intending to harm and disfigure those who did the very same thing to her. Ieamon's friend attempts to stop her, but she's impossible to hold back. Amidst the struggle, Oiwa falls forward accidentally, fatally wounding herself against the friend samurai's sword. The wound is fatal, and Oiwa passes away then and there, but not before muttering Iemon's name over and over until her final breath. The friend, terrified by the possible repercussions of what just occurred, had fled the scene. Oiwa wasn't discovered again until the next morning by a servant. This servant rushed to tell Iemon, though instead of being mortified by Oiwa's death, or even that his plan went differently than he had intended, Iemon was overjoyed. Before the servant could leave Iemon's presence, he was met with his very own demise at the hands of Iemon. Iemon then went on to tell everyone that Oiwa and the servant were having an affair together, and thus went on to marry the doctor's wealthy granddaughter with no remorse. The wedding of Iemon and Ome had transpired peacefully, though it was what had occurred that very evening when Iemon had laid with his new bride for the very first time where the horror truly began. In the dark of night, when turning to Ome in their bed, Iemon was startled to see Ome's face replaced with the disfigured, gray, lifeless one of Oiwa. It was pale, gray, and cold. Her face was sinister and full of malice, an expression Oiwa had never held when alive. Though it could not be mistaken, Oiwa's face had nefarious intent, and she was after Iemon. With the sight displayed before him, Iemon began to panic. He took out his sword and swung it at the woman. When everything was said and done, and Iemon was a bit more calm, Oiwa's ghostly face had vanished, and it was returned to its original form. And there laid Ome, lifeless on the ground from Iemon's actions. Iemon was nothing short of frightened, and he left the home. As Iemon fled in the dark of night, he was met with the ghost of the servant, standing in the middle of the road. His wounds, the wounds inflicted by Iemon himself, were still visible, but his form was white as a sheet, truly appearing undead. Iemon blindly attacked out of fear once more. It was following this attack that the servant had vanished and the old doctor had remained, leaving Iemon responsible for the passing of both Ome and the doctor. By this point, Iemon was in a full state of panic, hyperventilating as he ran as fast as his legs could carry him, trying to escape the horrors, the paranoia, and the supposed hallucinations that led him to his actions. He was unaware of where he was going, even his surroundings. All he knew was to escape. Though Oiwa does not allow him to escape. Her ghost appears at every turn, down every road Iemon flees down, materializing everywhere he went. With that same expression of malice, Iemon continued to flee. As the days and nights went on, Iemon remained on the run. Every flickering light on a lantern he saw was Oiwa's disfigured face. In his dreams every night when he could sleep, she haunted them, never allowing him to rest. Desperate and losing his grasp on reality, Iemon fled to the mountains, far from any civilization. This is where he slowly went completely and utterly insane, seeing Oiwa everywhere. He was never seen or heard from again. This was because, through a slow and painful insanity, Oiwa received her revenge for both herself and her father. And that, my friends, is the story of Yotsuya Kaidan. Now, there are much longer versions of this story, particularly the original play, that has a lot of different subplots and other things going on, in addition to the actual main plot. Every adaptation has its own spin on it as well. Though what has always remained is the ghost story of Oiwa, and how she was betrayed and wronged, and how she became a vengeful ghost in spirit. Rightfully so, I think. So, what I told you was the main story. Now, to those familiar with horror, or Japanese horror more specifically, this story may not come off as anything too startling or disturbing in any way, but mind you, the story is almost 200 years old at this point. There are many tropes and story elements introduced here in Yotsuya Kaidan that went on to inspire other Japanese horror stories in the years to follow. The story of Yotsuya Kaidan has evolved into the modern day horror and even creepypasta and forum horror that you see today. So, TLDR, this story is pretty impactful when considering Japanese horror and the history of Japanese horror as a whole. Similarly to how the likes of Sailor Moon and Creamy Mommy inspired the abundance of magical girl anime out there today, Yotsuya Kaidan was a bit of a pioneer within its genre. Arguably the most famous modern horror to be inspired by Yotsuya Kaidan was Ringu, or The Ring, as Sadako herself was inspired by the character Oiwa. Moving back over to the story itself, among the most prominent story elements was the role of the character Oiwa and her shift to transforming into an onryo. Onryo are ghosts of those who were wronged and betrayed while they were alive. During their transition to the afterlife, they became utterly immersed by their intent on revenge, and thus become a dark entity in order to seek out this revenge. Their only purpose is to ensure vengeance and the suffrage of those who had wronged them. The people responsible for wronging an onryo can never escape their wrath. Many onryo have existed throughout Japanese history, some through folklore and ghost stories, while others are believed to have existed in real life. These recorded observances date as far back as the year 797 in the history text Shoku Nihongi. As far as more recent times, onryo have been seen in anime, video games, and film. You may have also noticed Oiwa's scarred face, or more specifically that half-scarred face where half of it is normal, the other half is mutilated and horribly burned. You may have also noticed that there's characters in modern media that are pretty similar in appearance to that. Two examples that come to mind for me personally are Todoroki from My Hero Academia, as well as Zuko from Avatar. Not one, but two real-life murders were used as the inspiration for Yotsuya Kaidan. These real-life news stories were heavily sensationalized during this time period. Remember the use of the servant in the story itself? And how Iemon used that servant to dispose of Oiwa in a way that retained his own reputation. This was partially based on a heavily publicized real-life incident. Two servants had plotted to murder their respective masters, and, well, they did it. They certainly didn't get away with their actions, however, as they were caught and punished severely the very same day they committed the crimes. And there was yet another real-life incident. This one involved a samurai who had caught one of his concubines having an affair with her servant. This samurai was anything but merciful, having thrown both into the Kanda River after restraining them to a board of wood. I did try to find more information on these two cases myself. While many sources cite that these were inspirations for the ghost story, I could not find anything detailing the cases themselves, though this was 200 years ago. And now, while not directly based on any real-life events, there's also the unsavory portrayal of the Ronin. While samurai were once respected and served a great purpose, they were left without any duty in times of peace, after war had subsided. This led to many real-life Ronin to turn to a life of crime due to sudden poverty. This was a real-life issue in Japan that was not fully touched upon until the premiere of Yotsuya Kaidan. And then there's the Shrine of Oiwa, the real-life Shrine of Oiwa, found in the Myogoji Temple within modern-day Tokyo. There is also Oiwa's gravesite, a short distance away within the Sugamo ward of Tokyo. But hold on. If Oiwa didn't actually exist, why did she have a shrine and a gravesite? Well, that's because a real-life Yotsuya Oiwa did actually exist. And she was also the basis for the kabuki play and even folklore and ghost stories that preceded it. That's right, Even before the play, the general structure of Oiwa's ghost story was passed around as a folktale, and it's said that it all originated with this one specific Oiwa. According to the signs placed at the shrine altar, this Oiwa lived a happy life with a supportive, loving husband. Despite that, it's been said that the very first incarnation of Oiwa's ghost story was created out of jealousy and spite. By who exactly? We don't really know for certain. Perhaps a real-life Ome. It's believed the story of Yotsuya Kaidan had caused unease with the real Oiwa who was resting in peace prior to that. After the story came about, those at the shrine began witnessing a great deal of paranormal activity. Some cite Oiwa's shrine as among the most haunted locations within Tokyo. According to those who were involved in adaptations of Yotsuya Kaidan over the years, a lot of accidents during filming or rehearsals would occur. All of these accidents were bizarre and unexplained. For this reason, it's become a tradition for every cast and crew working on a Yotsuya Kaidan project to visit both the shrine and the grave of Oiwa to appease her spirit and prevent any accidents or hardship. And apparently, no accidents or paranormal incidents have ever occurred since this tradition began. And that is the story and the lore of Yotsuya Kaidan. Story and lore so influential to Japanese media, yet not really known at all in the West. There is so much interesting Japanese folklore out there. This is really the tip of the iceberg, and that doesn't mean I'm making an iceberg on Japanese folklore. I'm just saying there's a lot. Though that's an idea. Anyways, you may notice this is me. Behold, Sakura, or Alex, my name's Alex, on camera. And you may also notice that this is new. I'm a little shy, but I'm trying out a new format. I want to get more comfortable on camera and kind of put a face to the name and the content I put out, so, you know, my content's a little more unique and personable and just more of my own. So if you guys like seeing me being awkward on camera, let me know. I know I'm a very awkward person, but hopefully I get better as we go. So yeah, anyways, that's all I have for today. Yeah, like, comment, bell if you enjoyed my content, that is. And yeah, anyways, that is all for today, guys, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.